the school of beatbox.
Okay, so the first step in learning the art of beatboxing is all about the fundamental sounds. Now, these fundamental sounds are key important sounds for a reason. It's because you can literally make any rhythm in the world with them. So it doesn't matter what style of music you're into, what type of beatbox rhythm you're trying to create, you can do it with these fundamental sounds. So we're going to learn the bass drum, the hi-hats, and the snare. The first sound that we are going to look at is the bass drum. What is the bass drum? The bass drum is the big round drum that sits in front of a drummer. There is a foot pedal, and when the drummer hits that pedal, a beater will hit the skin of the drum, and what does it do? It makes the bass drum sound. This is it. This is the bass drum, guys. You only need to use your lips. What you don't need to do is use excessive amounts of air. No, you don't need to do that. So don't do this. All that's going to do is make you run out of air quicker. Okay, so keep it contained like this, almost like you're bouncing a ball. Basketball. Feel me? Once you've got this kind of sound going, you might feel that it's not as loud or not as full or not as powerful as you want it to be. So in order to make it a bit more powerful, we're going to have to use a little bit of our imagination. So imagine first of all that your mouth is like a door that is jammed shut. Okay, so have this door tightly shut, so your lips are tightly shut, and you're leaning on this door and you're trying to burst it open, but it's not quite opening. So what that does is it builds pressure behind your lips like this. It might look a little bit ridiculous, but that's fine because we're beatboxing and we're going to learn these sounds correctly. So then all of a sudden we're going to burst open this door. Okay, we're going to burst this door open. In fact, you can use the word burst. Yeah? Burst. One more time. Burst. That's the kind of sound we want. Then we want to remove the word. If you're using that technique, you can also use the word push, burst, butterfly, whatever. Now you'll see that I'm using the right side of my mouth. That doesn't mean that you need to use the right side as well. You might feel more comfortable using the front of your mouth or the left side of your mouth. It's totally up to you, right? I use the right side because it feels more natural for me, and after over 25 years of beatboxing, that's the side that I have personally trained to make my bass drum sound. Okay, but you can use the front or you can use the left side. You check it out, experiment, see what works for you. Once you've got the bass drum sound down and in the bag, you want to try some simple grooves. So first of all, we're going to try a simple 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's slow it down first. The next thing you want to do is introduce different rhythms. So now's the time to tap into your own creativity and see what type of rhythms you want to do. I'm just going to give you an example now of some of the types of rhythms you might like to try. There we have the bass drum, guys. So the next sound we're going to look at is the hi-hat. Now the hi-hat sits right next to the drummer, two metal discs like this, they open and close, and we can get the closed hi-hat sound and the open hi-hat sound. Let's start with the closed hi-hat. This is what it sounds like. So you want your tongue in the L position, behind the top two front teeth and also touching the gum. L, la, 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 la. Say the word love, for example. Love. Once you've got it there, what we want to do is build pressure the same way that we did with the bass drum. So you imagine that that door's tightly shut, and we build that pressure first, and then we release it to get a nice full hi-hat sound. To make the open hi-hat sound super easy, all we're going to do is pretty much just add a little bit more of an S sound, like this. Super simple, right? Now, to make the open hi-hat sound more realistic, think about the open hi-hat. When the drumstick hits that hi-hat, it's going to move quite a bit, right? And that's what makes the sound. Now, that cymbal is gradually going to slow down. So we gradually want to change the volume of our open hi-hat sound to really let it tail off and disappear, okay? Like this. And then try different intensities. Think about the drummer hitting that hi-hat with different amounts of force. Okay, so sometimes you might hit it hard, sometimes a bit more gentle. Once we've got that down, we want to try and put the closed hi-hat and the open hi-hat together into some simple rhythms like this. So now what you want to do is introduce your own musicality, your own creativity to play around with those two sounds, the closed hi-hat and the open hi-hat. Here's an example to show you the types of rhythms you might do. Here's a very cool tip to help you make your hi-hats even faster. Imagine we're using a count of 1, 2, 3, 4. On the 1, we want to make our hi-hat a little bit more powerful, a little bit louder. The 2, 3, and 4, a little bit quieter. Brilliant, guys. Next up, we're going to look at the snare, and I have a variety of snares to show you. The first snare that we're going to look at is the most simple one, and it's called the K snare. Firstly, just say any word that begins with K. Kettle, kitten, kite, Kit Kat. It really doesn't matter. Take away the word and just emphasize the K sound. By changing the shape of the mouth, and even getting this kind of sound, a little bit more crunchy. Really experiment, see what type of K snares you can get. The K snare is definitely a good snare to start with. It might not be the most impressive, but at least it enables us to try out some beat patterns. But before we get to those beat patterns, let me show you some other snares. The next snare I'm going to show you is called the inward K snare. This is what it sounds like. Imagine first of all that you're calling over a pet dog or cat. Here boy, here boy. You make this clicking sound and that will help you locate where this sound comes from. Now the trick is to make that clicking sound but also breathe in at the same time. So instead of, we get. So the trick is to make that click sound but also breathe in at the same time, guys, right? So that's just the click, and now with the breath in. If you're unable to breathe in at the same time as making the click sound right now, you might be getting this sound. Your side edges of your tongue will be on the roof of your mouth, and you've kind of trapped air between the tongue and the roof of the mouth. And when you release the side edges of the tongue, that's what makes the sound. That is the inward K snare. The next level is to add a little bit of a breath in through the mouth before we make the inward K snare sound, and we get this effect. Wow, right? So first of all, the click. Then we have the breath in. Then we add the breath before we make the inward K snare sound. Keep practicing, you will get there. Let's move on to another snare. So the next snare we're going to look at is the PF snare, okay? PF snare. The sound that's made when a drummer hits the snare drum right in the center of the drum. So the tip of the drumstick hits right in the center. We have a P sound, a P sound, and we have a F sound, an F sound. So first of all, we have a P, which is very similar to the bass drum sound, okay? But the sound we want is a bit more towards P rather than B. So a bass drum sound would be, and a P sound would be, okay? So we've got the P right there, and then over here we got, which is super simple, right? And then we put those two together and we get the PF snare. Now, if your PF snare is sounding a little bit more like a bit flat and loose, do not worry about it. Now, you're training your mouth and your lips to become stronger, and when they do get stronger, that sound will come, I promise you. When your lips strengthen, they will go from to. If you're sounding a little bit more like that right now, slowly but surely it will change. That's the PF snare, guys. The next snare is called the RIMSHOT. If you imagine a drummer, he would make the RIMSHOT sound by using his drumstick kind of flat against the skin of the drum. It sounds like kind of a clicking sound. This is the RIMSHOT sound. Now the RIMSHOT is very, very similar to the inward K snare. So if you've already mastered the inward K snare, you should have no trouble making the RIMSHOT sound. The only difference really is that we don't breathe in, okay? So it's somewhere in between calling the dog or the cat or the gerbil or the lion. So somewhere in between that clicking sound and the inward K snare. So we don't breathe in. In fact, what we do is we keep the sound contained within the mouth. So you've got your tongue, side edges of your tongue against the roof of your mouth. And you've trapped air between the tongue and the roof of the mouth. When we release the side edges of the tongue, we get that sound. put your hand in front of your mouth and you make the rim shot sound, you will feel a little bit of air coming out, but we're not excessively breathing out and we're not excessively breathing in. We are just making this sound and keeping it contained in the mouth. Cool, right? It's the moment you've been waiting for. It's now time to put these fundamental sounds together. Okay, let's look at our first beat pattern. So we've got a bass drum, a hi-hat, a snare, and another hi-hat. And it sounds something like this. If the only snare that you've managed to master at the moment is the simple K snare, don't worry, that's the reason it's there. I know it's not the most impressive, but at least you can work with some beat patterns. If you're struggling with that speed, what I want you to do is just slow it down. So you might do that same beat pattern at this speed. You might want to speed it up. Here's what the beat pattern sounds like using a different snare. I'm going to use the rim shot. What about the inward snare? Or the PF snare? Now we're going to look at our second beat pattern. It's almost the same as the first one. The only difference is we're going to have a double kick. So instead of going we're going to go like this. Now I'm using the rim shot sound here, but you can make any of the other snare sounds. There we have your first two beat patterns. You can breathe out and in at the same time as making various sounds. The bass drum sound, outwards. Now remember the bass drum lesson. Do not breathe out excessively like this. Now I will make the bass drum sound, but breathe in at the same time. Yes. You can also do the same thing with the hi-hat. And here's what it sounds like when we breathe in. Let's just take the bass drum on its own to start with. Now I'll show you exactly the same thing using the hi-hat. There you have it, guys, an awesome breathing technique. Try it with different beat patterns, try it with your own beat patterns, try it with different sounds and see how it works for you.
School of Beatbox. Beatbox.